slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
I've always said that a longer buildup is without a doubt the way to go as you're training for a marathon. And a 24-week marathon training plan, I do have those on RunDreamAchieve.com, and I think that is the most optimal time frame to train for a marathon is 6 months. There has been, I made a recent video a few weeks ago about training for a marathon in a year. Okay, that's not really the norm for most runners, but in some cases it does take athletes up to about a year to train effectively for a marathon. I mean, this is not a 5K, it's not a 10K or a 1500. This is a whole different ballgame. You have to be much more aware of the complexities of the marathon distance. And I think a 24-week marathon training plan will set you up for success because, again, you're allotting much more time, 6 months, to adapt to the hard training you're doing. And I think if you try to rush your fitness and you're trying to get ready for a marathon in a matter of, say, 2 to 3 months, 8 to 12 weeks, it's just much more difficult because it does take about 28 days for the body to adapt to what you're throwing at it, whether that's hill training workouts, tempo runs, you're trying to get your long run extended out to maybe 20 miles. That takes several weeks to get to that point. And I think a 6-month build-up, 24-week marathon training plan is definitely the way to go in terms of training properly for a marathon and getting the most out of yourself. And that's why I have created 24-week marathon training plans on RunDreamAchieve.com. I think out of all the training plans, between 5 and 6 months is the best option. And even throughout my training career as a marathon runner, I've always trained minimum 16 weeks, but usually it's been 20 to 24 weeks in length. Work your way to a point where you can get that long run out to between 17 miles to 23, 24 miles. Some of you, depending on how advanced you are in your fitness and overall background in the sport, might go out toward around 50K, okay, for your long runs. Yuki Kawachi from Japan, I was recently watching a video about him, and he said that he does a 50K long run once per month training for his marathons. Now, Yuki's a 207 marathoner. This is not for everybody, and I certainly don't think that you have to go 31 miles for your long runs to prepare and race effectively in the marathon distance. Most marathoners can do very well with long runs between 16 and 18 miles. In my case, I usually focused on a minimum of around 18 miles, and I would go out to around 23. I've gone out to 30 miles once. I did a 27-miler a few times. So I do think that running and staying consistent with your buildup, okay? You want to make sure that you understand in the early stages of any fitness training plan, you're going to have a hard time hitting the splits. You're going to have a hard time doing tempo runs. First start off your tempo runs. I mean, for me, I start off around 3 to 4 miles for my tempo runs, training for marathons, and then I gradually extend the duration of that out to around 16 kilometers or 10 miles, up to around as far as to around 12 miles. So, but it's a work in progress for all of us. Okay, you're not going to adapt quickly in this sport. It definitely takes time and patience to run a great marathon. But if you want to do it right, a 24-week marathon training plan is the way to go. I actually followed a 24-week training plan leading into the 2007 California International Marathon, ran a PR of 2:19:35, and even now training for the Valencia Marathon, I'm actually focused on a longer build-up. It's going to be a year, but I haven't raced a marathon in a little over 10 years at the time of this video, which is today's the 23rd of June, Sunday, 23rd of June 2024. So the last marathon I ran was the 2013 California International Marathon, where I ran 2:32:55 when I was 37, and I'm 47 now. So without a doubt, though, if you're just getting started running marathons, minimum 16 weeks. But if you really want to do it right, 20 to 24 weeks. In a 24-week marathon training plan, you have much more time. You're not going to be in a rush to throw all the training at yourself. I always believe that athletes should have spent a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks of easy aerobic base mileage before they start any type of training plan, because you want to first strengthen the joints, strengthen the ligaments of your body, get to, and also callous your mind, callous your physical body. You want to make sure that you're toughening yourself and preparing yourself for what you're going to be throwing at yourself for the next 6 months. Okay. The first 2 months should be mainly focused on the base phase, where you're starting some introductory workouts at moderately hard efforts. That might mean some fartlek sessions on the roads or on the track, maybe like sprinting the straightaways, jogging the corners. It might mean starting some moderately hard, maybe at threshold effort, repeat 800s, repeat thousands, but not hardcore speed workouts. Okay, as you move from the base building phase, that first 2 months, then you should focus more on race specific training, and that should be go between 2 months of your preparation. Okay, that's where you're starting to introduce some faster workouts, but not extremely hard anaerobic workouts, but it's going to be some workouts that's going to test you physically and mentally. It's those last 2 months or so of a 6 month or of a 24-week marathon training plan where it should be more on speed specific, where you're really focusing on you're working on your overall leg speed, and then you work on the taper phase as well. Taper phase should be around the last, for some athletes it's the last 2 weeks. I do a 10-day taper. I think a 10-day taper will help you go into your race feeling more energized and rested rather than feeling lethargic and tired. I think a big mistake a lot of marathon runners make is we start dropping our volume and intensity 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks out from our goal marathon, and we feel like we should be feeling phenomenal going into our race, but we're feeling flat. Okay, so you want to maintain your volume, maintain your intensity, continue to get your intensity should rise even as you move into that taper phase, and then you start to drop your volume significantly, about 50 to 60%, 10 days out from your goal marathon race. And then the last week of the race, you should really focus just on, again, carbo loading. So my recommendation is to do a 3-mile run at goal marathon race pace 4 days out from your goal marathon. Okay, and again, a 24-week marathon training plan is plenty of time to really stress yourself adequately and to allot that time for your body to adapt to what you're throwing at it. And then you go into that taper phase. Now, the taper phase is the most difficult part because for us, it's much harder to drop that volume and to, we feel like we're getting out of shape, like we're doing less, like we're gaining weight, in the last 10 days of, during your taper phase. It's natural to feel that way, but it's also, the taper phase is usually, a lot of athletes get very grumpy during that time frame when you've spent so many months building your volume up and being consistent with your mileage that when you start to do less, you feel like you're getting out of shape. Just know that this is natural to feel that way. Every athlete does feel that way at times, but you want to go into your race feeling rested, energized, motivated, and take confidence in your training as well. Okay, if you're focusing on a 6-month build up for your marathon, you're doing it right. Okay, if you're, and it's not to say if you invest in like an 8-week training plan or maybe like a 12-week training plan, you're not going to run a new PR. Again, it's all based on how much aerobic base mileage have you done leading into your marathon buildup. Have you spent some time strengthening your body, strengthening your joints and ligaments and muscles prior to starting a buildup? If you've done that, then I think an 8 to 12 week buildup can work for a lot of athletes. Okay, but if you just jump into a training plan immediately and you haven't done any aerobic mileage prior to the start of that, that's going to be very hard. Okay, so again, in a 6-month buildup, you should work your way, your long run should gradually extend out to around 18 to around 23 to 24 miles in length. And again, that's going to vary from athlete to athlete. Some athletes work much better on lower mileage versus other athletes that need to do higher volume. But just don't get caught up in spending the majority of your time running aerobically, because again, you are going to build an enormous amount of endurance. You're going to burn fat effectively, but you want to stress yourself in training adequately a few times each week, 2 to 3 times each week, at or below goal marathon race pace. Work that tempo run, get that tempo run where you're running at your anaerobic threshold out to around 10 to 12 miles in length. For some athletes, you might do much better off of maybe 5 to 7 mile tempo runs. But again, this is a marathon, so if a 5 to 6 mile tempo run, it's definitely going to make you very strong for, say, like a 5,000, 10,000, even up to a marathon or a half marathon. But a marathon, you want to extend that out, okay? In the marathon, also make sure your energy expenditure, okay? Don't try to go too aggressive in the marathon and get too hyped up and try to run someone else's race, okay? You want to make sure that you have that energy in the last half, and especially in the last 10K, okay? They always say there's 2 parts of a marathon, the first 20 miles, first 32 kilometers, and that last 10 kilometers, where most runners who went out way too fast are really struggling to handle that high amount of lactic acid buildup they're dealing with, and obviously the dehydration and glycogen depletion that they're dealing with. Okay, you don't have to hit a wall in a marathon if you train properly. So I hope this video on the things, some ideas and tactics and things you need to be thinking about in a 24-week marathon training plan has been helpful for you. If you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to leave me a comment below. I'll definitely reach back out to all of you. Thank you so much for your support. If you're looking for a training plan or personal coaching or a running course, you can check out the resources below these videos or on RunDreamAchieve.com. So thank you so much for your support, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.